Kia ora team, Noel Willoff here. Thanks so much for tuning into today's episode, but there's one important thing I want to say before you watch this video. I've noticed that over 91% of you who watch our content on YouTube do not subscribe to the podcast. My promise to you is if you subscribe to the podcast, I'll continue to get more of the guests on that you love and make sure that this conversation and this podcast grows to new levels. So please hit that subscribe button. Secondly, a massive shout out to our official sponsor of the podcast, Moana Road. If you want to save some cash and get some of their awesome gears, head to their website and plug in BTS20 and you'll get 20% off all of their products. Save some cash, support the podcast. Hope you enjoyed this conversation. Cool. Richard, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So good to have you on, man. And, I've been drinking your coffee brews for many years. So really excited to sort of go under the hood caps and explore a bit more about your journey and story launching Flight Coffee.
Yeah, awesome. Happy to chat, man. So
I guess sort of starting at the beginning, like what parts of your childhood really influenced who you are today and where you are?
That's an interesting question. Didn't think we were going to go there that early, but actually I was recently diagnosed with severe ADHD and autism as well. And on reflection on, so that happened last year, that diagnosis, and on reflection of like that whole process, going through that process, and to sort of where I am now, looking back on my childhood now makes a lot more sense because there was I had this sort of solid belief that was born from my mum, which was like, doesn't matter what anyone thinks about you, just go ahead and just don't let anyone sort of stop you. And while that was very, very well meaning, it had its pitfalls at the same time. It introduced challenges. It kind of is important sometimes what other people think of you. But yeah, my childhood was very privileged. Brought up in a middle class family, parents who are still together. We were really well looked after, and our parents really just did what they could to afford us as much of the opportunities that we could get. So yeah, very, very lucky in that from my upbringing and everything. So yeah, it's I would say that just the home environment and all those opportunities that my parents sort of helped enable were a big part of I guess a reason for why I am where we are now.
That's amazing, man. And super interesting with the recent diagnosis. Like, what led you to, I guess, get a actual diagnosis? Were there things which were like patterns that you're like, your son? Yeah.
My son's got pretty severe ADHD, and it's remarkable when he doesn't have his meds, because he's like bouncing all over the walls. Like that's almost not an overstatement. And then was it July last year or the year before last, he had his diagnosis, and it was just a bit like, oh, this is all making a bit too much. This is all too familiar. And then went through the process with a psychiatrist and all that sort of stuff. And to my absolute surprise, I mean, no one's surprised at the ADHD. I mean, I think it's a bit of a superpower, to be honest. For sure,
100%.
But the autistic side of it was actually quite that one knocked me a little bit. Not that it's now I know what it is and how it manifests. Not at all surprising, but it's like now it's like, okay, you just have to manage that. And the things that come with that.
Were there any, like, now with this diagnosis, are there any patterns as you retrospectively look at your childhood where you're like, that kind of makes sense why I was maybe this way?
Big time. Like I mean, it's a common analogy, but like the Eveready bunny, like it was just go and go and go and go and go. But then when you would stop, you would just like, you would crash. And there was very little regulation in and around, I guess, energy regulation and whatnot. But like to be honest, like if I think about when I first started my first cafe and I first started roasting, and when we built Memphis, our first cafe, and then now the Hangar, it's like there's there's a reason that there's an ability somehow to do really unsustainable hours. And I'm not saying you have to have ADHD in order to do that, but certainly for me, it was just like go, 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 go.
Yeah. 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 And I've definitely seen that from a lot of people that do have ADHD is, it's that ability just to have that almost, the hyper ability to like balance so many different things at once that many people probably wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, it's really strange. Like I'm calm in chaos, but then there's small things that are just get me, and it's like, get out of your head, like stop it. Like you've got all this other stuff that you can manage in chaos, and then these little things, and it's so it's a bit of it's the game of the mind, at this point for sure.
And when we circle back to, I guess, sort of like high school for you growing up in the Hawke's Bay over in Napier, you, after high school, you then went to the Navy. And I believe you wanted to become like a sort of chef, or you were considering that as maybe like a pathway, but you didn't go down that route.
Yeah, really interesting. So I originally wanted to be a pilot. You got to be super smart for that, in terms of mathematical ability. And man, I'm the only one in my family to pass 5th form maths or school certificate maths, and I did 6th form maths twice, so that wasn't happening. But I had the privilege of getting a job at an Italian restaurant in Napier called Trattoria alla Toscana, and it's thus still there. Kim and Razor are still going hard, and that was, I was 16, and I've always liked to cook and whatnot, so I more or less started in the kitchen there, and that's like a lot of my sort of foundational ethos, around I guess hospitality, work ethic, and whatnot was really born out of that, right? So that was like, I would work a more or less a 9-hour shift as a 16-year-old on a Saturday, and that was normal. We'd stop at the end of the day, we'd have dinner at 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night, and that was the sort of the basis of my introduction to hospo. And so when I had finished high school, the Air Force wasn't a thing, but a good family friend of the family, they had their son Matt join the Navy a few years prior, and I was like, I'll give that a crack, and joined not as a chef. Really glad I didn't join as a chef, but joined in the communications department, which was a really interesting time in and of itself. Moving more into the world of satellite communications and what that means from a military and a encryption perspective, and yet still using like World War II era, and they still do today. They're just reliable HF radio systems. So it was a really interesting time. But certainly one of those things that I'm really, really glad I did. It definitely set me up with a bit of the stereotype is like, sorts you out, right? It's not
a bit of discipline.
Just 100%, man. Discipline. And if there's one thing is that you don't realize when you're 18 that you actually probably need, it's discipline.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. That's really interesting. So how many years were you in the Navy for?
2 years.
2 years.
To the day, actually. Yeah. So it was 2 years, and I left him in the January 2006, and went back to Hawke's Bay and did the culinary arts course at EIT, Eastern Institute of Technology, and that was a great year, 06, and then that year there was an advertisement in the newspaper, own your own cafe, and classic Richard back then. I was like, oh, what's the worst that could go wrong? Applied with it, applied to open this cafe. It was in the new Mitre 10 Mega that was opening up, and back then they were known as Espresso Gardens. They're all now Columbus cafes.
Ah, yes, yeah, okay.
But the original version of that was Espresso Garden.
Yeah,
and so I went through that process with a friend, and we were accepted to run the cafe. He sort of was like, actually, I'm going to move to Australia. So then did it at the 11th hour. My neighbour, who was a chef at the time, jumped in, and we ran. Well, that relationship lasted about 6 months. She parted ways, and then Fiona and Graham Ricketts, who of Mitre 10, they sort of took over her half, and we sort of ran it for 3 years together. So
wow.
And that sort of was the first cafe. I mean, looking back, it was an incredible experience. It failed. I ended up bankrupt, and which was probably, in hindsight, unavoidable at the time. I had a dad's really good mate was a property developer for many years, and I remember him saying when we opened it, when I first had signed the lease, he's like, if I had known this, I would have convinced your parents to not have you do this cafe.
Did he say that to you?
Yeah.
Wow.
And foolishly at the time, I thought, well, what's the worst that could happen? I'll go bankrupt. And fucking what a flippant thing to say. And what a stupid thing to say. And that is exactly what happened. It didn't break me, but my God, it was a very interesting time.
Because at that age, what, you sort of mid-20s?
I was 24 when I started the cafe. Yeah, 24. No, sorry. I was 21.
21. Fuck.
Was it 21?
Very fresh.
Yeah, 21. I was 21. Yeah, and by the time I left, I was 24. Yeah, that's right.
That's incredible for even a 21-year-old to take that leap and have that risk of setting up their own cafe. So what were like the stakes for you at that point in your life? Like, what did you have to lose as a 21-year-old venturing down that route?
Well, that's a great question. Not much at the time, but I also had no sense of understanding of what risk was, and that's probably dangerous. We have systems in New Zealand that can catch you and sort of lift you up, right? That can prop you up in these events, and I guess the thing for me was like, I just have to do this, right? Like it's a thing that I had to do, and I guess the way that I sort of look at it now, it's I never went to university, but the money that I borrowed on my folks' house, that I subsequently paid them back because I went bankrupt and the bank came calling. Yeah. I guess I use it as like that was my university degree.
Yeah, for sure.
It was certainly one that it's definitely sort of helped form and frame sort of who I am today. But very formative years. As a 21-year-old, no notion of risk is and full of ambition. Yeah, is an interesting thing at the time.
And I think for like any young person, 21, starting your own cafe, then becoming bankrupt and probably a bunch of debt that you've got to then sort of service. A lot of people would just sort of walk away and be like, okay, that's my little stint at entrepreneurship or hospitality or, owning cafes, done. I'm never going to go through that process again. So what can you say about, I guess, like your relationship with like resilience and your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's no like, for me it's just like you just have to keep going. You don't stop. I remember when I was declared bankrupt, of all places in the world, I was driving to Gisborne and I was in Wairoa. My truck had broken down on the way up.
Wairoa.
And my father-in-law was driving down to pick us up from Gizzy. And I remember just sitting outside the information centre in Wairoa, like just being like, oh man, I've got nothing more I can lose. And that's actually a really freeing feeling. And it was like, fuck, if this is the bottom, this isn't that bad. Now, I think what comes with that is, age, certainly. I'd certainly, I didn't have a house, I didn't have kids, I didn't have, sorry, I did have a kid. My daughter was barely 5 days old at the time, but I guess my perspective on the stakes weren't as high as they would be, say, now. I'm 40 next month, and I guess I would have a different feeling to that. But I will never forget that feeling of sitting there in Wairoa going, I've got nothing more to lose. I can't lose any more. but I've still got myself, and I've still got my wife Sharon and our daughter. And you know what? Well, okay, my truck's just blown up on the Napier Wairau Road, but it could be worse.
Yeah,
I'm lucky.
yeah,
So that was I'll never forget that feeling, and that was really a really powerful moment of perspective. And in terms of resilience, it's like, you know, you could give up, but then what? Like, what are you going to do? Work for someone? I mean, that would be like a prison sentence for me, I think. And yeah, it's
That's really insightful way. And were you always entrepreneurial growing up? Like, were you one of those kids like selling lemons at a lemonade stand?
Yeah. We lived in Canada. I talk about my parents giving us opportunities. Well, they took us to Canada when I was 11. Mum was a formative IT years at EIT in Hawke's Bay, and she did a teacher exchange with a teacher over there. So they moved to New Zealand for a year. We moved to Canada for a year in Victoria and BC. And you know, it was the classic North American stereotypes. I had, you know, made friends and whatnot, and we were selling juice on the, you know, the summer on the side of the road. It was like literally the Simpsons stereotype. But yeah, I mean, I was always keen, like, I think my first job actually was when I was 11 in Canada, just for our neighbour, just putting down you know, like wood chip from she had massive wooden paths and whatnot, and yeah, always keen to just try and, you know, make money, and you know, just for myself. And yeah, then paper run at 12, 13, whatever, then into a kitchen at 16, and yeah, so I've always been like curious at wanting to find ways to generate, you know, I guess, wealth for myself. It's, I don't know where it's come from. You can't teach entrepreneurialism, right? Like, it's either in you or it's not. You can teach business, you can teach commerce, you can teach accounting, you can, I believe, to an extent, teach marketing. But you can't teach entrepreneurialism. You have it or you don't. At least in my view. Others may disagree, but the things that being an entrepreneur and that drive you are not the things that you can read from a textbook, right? It's this innate sense of like go get 'em, or drive to try something different that no one else is doing, or, you know, seeing an opportunity and going, fuck it, I'm going to double down and let's do that.
Yeah. There's a real relationship with sort of like risk appetite, I think, for entrepreneurs as well. Because I think for a lot of people, and this has been interesting even from like myself as I get older, the older I get, the more conscious I am around, how much more I have now to lose, as you were saying earlier. Because now, you know, your salary gets bigger, you're earning more money, you're in like a stable bit of your career. And I sometimes do have those thoughts that come through my head, like, what if I just walked away and, like, you know, started something? But I think, that relationship with risk and entrepreneurial and being an entrepreneur, they go hand in hand, eh?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you have an innate like risk like appetite of some degree. I mean, okay, it's on a spectrum, right? It's on a scale. When I was 21, there was like, turns out, all risk. And then, you know, as you get older, that sort of appetite changes as your needs and as your, you know, I guess, you know, wants also sort of change. So yeah, for sure.
So take us to, I guess, climbing out of the pit of being bankrupt, and when you started then sort of like roasting your own sort of coffee beans, and like where that whole idea and sort of concept came from.
Yeah, well, I had so when I had the cafe, I was like, you talk about curiosity. I was curious, and so I was like, man, I'm pretty sure I could do this. And so, well, it wasn't a business of any sort of sense back then. Really, I was just roasting for myself, and had the machine, had the bag of beans, and really just sort of went have at it. So introduced Matt. Matt's a best friend since we were 7 years old, and still shareholder business partner. He started it sort of with me, and then I had met through Matt Nick, who is business partner and in the you know, responsible too for running the company, and it was always just a thing on the side. And sort of when I went through the whole bankruptcy, I sort of just passed that to Matt. Matt's sister Colleen roasted for a while for us, and I went off and did a shitty sales gig, which was just like gross and like corporate and like.
What was the gig? What?
I worked for Bartercard.
Bartercard.
So it's like a trade exchange.
Oh yeah.
Sorry for those people who work for Bartercard or like Bartercard.
Yeah.
That's my own personal feelings. But like it was like, I guess what's really interesting about it was the one thing I got from that was like how to actually sell. Because you're selling a concept, you're not selling something physical. You're selling an idea, right? Trade dollars, right? You're selling an economy.
Yeah.
So anyway, so a lot of those lessons that I learned during that time were you actually can apply in any sales environment, which is super useful. And anyway, fast forward. The Memphis Belle, the cafe, our first cafe, which is where Swimsuit is now.
Right. Yes.
Opened in 2010, and then that kicked off, and that was really cool. And that was 15 years ago. Yeah,
Crazy.
April 2010, Memphis opened. And that kicked off for a couple of years, and we were just, Nick was running that. Like he was just earning enough for like. What was it, beer and rent money, I think. And I think he was only 19 at the time.
Wow.
And so he really sort of led that charge. He setting up Memphis and Flight in Wellington, and coffee was being roasted in Napier. And then 2012 I sort of 2011 I was working for the company, and then was roasting in Napier on the corner of somewhere in the industrial area there. And just sort of built bit by bit there. And then 2012 we opened the hangar.
The legendary hangar. It's a bit of a staple in Wellington.
Yeah, it's 13 this year. We signed the lease was signed in 2012 February, and we finally opened it in the September of that year. It's sort of the I guess the rest is history. 2012 we opened the hangar, and then 2013 we had to move out. We were roasting in the hangar at the time. Had to move out because it's a really dumb idea putting a coffee roaster in a cafe.
Due to space or
space, but also like, oh, what's that?
Yeah, true.
We had a couple of fires, and it's it was pretty wild. And then so 2014, I guess officially came back into the business, but was always working for it. And then I guess we went to the factory where we are now, and just sort of grew from there. 2013, Nick placed 5th in the World Barista Championships.
Wow.
And that was the first year that I had sort of judged at the Worlds as well. And that year, like 2013 was a massive year of growth for us. It was man, I look back at that time of really fondly. I mean, talk about building the plane as we're flying it. Yeah. Like I think we're still doing that to an extent, but just with much bigger parts.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were flying on the riding high on Nick's win and just like going for it, like egging each other on sort of thing.
So like, why did coffee, I guess, matter enough for you to build your life around it?
Well, it didn't at the time. When I started my first cafe, I didn't even drink coffee.
Really?
No.
Okay.
Which is interesting. But it's like, I guess coffee is the vehicle. Through coffee, I fell in love with business. And manufacturing, which is essentially what we do, roast coffee, turn a raw product into something. It really is that sort of mechanism. But it's what it's enabled for me over the years is like the opportunities and the build the network and all the travel. Matt, one of his big interests with one of the reasons why he wanted to be a part of Flight in the first place was to use flight's demand
Yeah.
for good use essentially. And so he was really the foundational person behind starting up Raw Material, which is the social enterprise.
Yep.
And in terms of directing Flight Coffee's demand through supply chains that have sort of meaningful impact. And so in 2016, he ran a Kickstarter campaign with Miguel, who's one of the guys in Colombia, and one of the, I guess, he's on the board of Raw Material Global, to raise funds to build a community wet mill, which is essentially a centralized processing station where we could buy the coffee cherries from our neighbors, process them in a homogenous kind of way, remove the control points and the production line of production that enable quality issues and whatnot, and then pass better prices back to those farmers. And so in terms of what coffee meant for us back then, it was certainly, there was very much a social aspect to it.
Yeah.
Now Flight and Raw Material, two very separate sort of entities, and Raw Material has now has operations in Timor-Leste, Burundi, there's a partnership in Mexico and Rwanda, and then the farm in Colombia as well. So a lot of my sort of from 2015 to just pre-COVID time was spent as an international sales director, I don't know what you want to call it, connecting markets. So I had customers in Russia, China, the UK, and sort of setting up all of those networks to I guess connect to the points of origin to sell this coffee through. So we set up, so we set up the idea at the time was export and then import, then distribute. But importing coffee and distributing it is so expensive.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. It sounds like raw materials at Social Enterprise is operating at a huge global scale.
Yeah.
What's the dark side of coffee? You mentioned that this sort of social procurement supply chain is really important, ethos for raw materials and Flight Coffee.
Yeah.
What is the dark side of, I guess, the industry that I guess many consumers wouldn't know about?
That is a pertinent question, and given where the coffee market's at right now, to be completely honest with you, the dark side of coffee is that the industry only exists on the back of keeping the people that grow it in poverty. Period. Because the current situation is the market's at a record high, and it has been sustained for a long period of time. It's in terms of where it's at, it's 4 times greater in value than it was back in 2019, more or less. And what this has proven is that, well, for example, they grow coffee in Australia. There's a reason why Australian grown coffee can't be commercialized en masse, because with the exception of some very wealthy producers in Brazil and estate and large farm holders in other parts of the world, the majority of coffee is grown and produced by small lot holder,
small growers.
Yeah, small growers. And the reality is that the reason we have an industry is because we pay the prices that the market more or less has dictated ever since the collapse of the ICO in '89, but even before then. And it's being an agricultural crop. It needs a lot of labor, with the exception, there are exceptions, large exceptions. However, the majority of producers globally are living on or below the poverty line. That is the perverse side of the industry. And you have a lot of companies who wave their CSR flag, they'll be a Rainforest Alliance, or they'll be fair trade, and that ticks the box. And it does. Sure, they marginally get more than they would if they weren't selling through those routes. However, the fact remains is that when this market pops, and it will sometime in the next couple of years, coffee producers in the likes of Rwanda, Burundi, Ethiopia, all the vulnerable places are going to be earning a lot less than they are now, and it's not going to make any sense as to why. Yeah.
Why might that sort of pop, and why would they end up potentially earning less?
Well, it's just the supply and demand. So right now globally, there's approximately forecasted global supply is behind by 10% of the demand. And weather events are keeping the weather speculators assuming that the upcoming Brazil harvest is going to be quite small. Brazil's the largest coffee producing country in the world.
Right.
Vietnam's the second, but it's double Vietnam. Vietnam is double the third largest producer, which is Colombia. So, when Brazil sneezes, the world catches cold with regard to coffee. And so what we're seeing in the current market is weather events, ongoing weather events, but dovetailed Robusta. So, cheap instant coffee. Robusta stocks in Vietnam and India have also been decimated due to weather.
Yeah.
So there's been short supply of that, and it's just kept the market really, really high.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess for like Flight Coffee, why has sort of sustainability and that sort of like social focus been really important for you guys as a business? Because I mean, it could have been, I'm sure it would have been a lot easier just to source like whatever beans that you wanted and not really care about the farmers on the other side. But like, why has that been such like an important principle for you and the team?
Look, it's an important principle because it's a part of our value set, right? It's like knowing where our coffee comes from, having relationships with producers, producing groups and whatnot. And it's not just like a platitude. You see you see all over the industry. It's like, oh no, I spoke to, here's a picture of me and the coffee farmer. And we have those photos as well, but there's at least through raw material there's meaningful and deliberate intentional relationships with producer groups and whatnot. But I do have to say, because of where the industry's been at since kind of COVID really, we've had to buy less and less through raw material and more through conventional trading routes. And the reason being is you have to be wealthy and you have to be incredibly profitable to be charitable. And this is another thing that is perverse about it, in that I know where I'd like to direct our demand, but off the back of COVID, like in New Zealand, in any case, it was an incredibly difficult time. A lot of businesses struggled. Many only survived because of the government subsidies, ours included as well. And 2020, 2021 were massive loss-making years for a lot of people, and you can't. Charity starts at home, especially in those environments, and so it's an unfortunate reality, but it's also an order of hierarchy, right? Like we got to have the ship's got to be steady, the business has to be profitable, and then we can look to diversify our procurement to more meaningful supply chains. So there's a lot of it's really dynamic, and it is really challenging. From that whole sustainability piece.
And I guess like what keeps you up at night at the moment, at the reins of Flight Coffee? Like what are some of those things as a business owner, as a founder, which you sort of lose sleep over?
We've partnered with our business partners that we have now based out of Melbourne in 2019. That was really great, really aligned sort of. They wanted to support us to grow. They had some contract roasting. They wanted to roast locally. Nick and I had known Craig, the principal, for since 2013 actually. Nick practiced in their spot in Melbourne when the Barista Champs were on back then, and so I guess what that partnership, I'm getting to the answer to the question. What that partnership brought to us was a structure that we hadn't. Was a business structure around the entrepreneurialism, right? Craig and Rocky, they are entrepreneurs, but they're also now very well established in business and have for a great number of years now. And so when I said I hadn't gone to university, I guess when this partnership started and came along, it's really applying our business,
Mm-hmm.
and then putting it in an actual structure and a frame.
Mm-hmm.
Actually writing budgets, actually
Mm-hmm.
understanding various department breakdowns, manufacturing, operational efficiencies,
The
and all
fundamentals,
these, yeah,
the foundation of the business.
Yeah, and so that was like, if that moment was like, okay, now the tree's really planted,
Yeah.
right? That taproot's going deep, and now we sort of are growing. So I guess we're now on the back. What are you? 2025, 4 years since COVID, and we've been in this market flux for a while.
Mm.
Last year we had the public sector layoffs. Inflation was 8-9%.
Yeah.
And now we're at a coffee market level that means trading margins are like non-existent compared to what they were in 2019. So what keeps me up is delivering our promise to our business partners, our shareholders, but also our people and our staff as well. I think it seems like since COVID, it's just like year 4 or 5 of just continually eating garbage, right?
Yeah.
If it's not one thing, it's another, but it's cyclic. I think everyone's just waiting for the everything to sort of calm down, and but whether or not we will have a 2019 market again or a 2018 market, who knows?
Yeah, tough times, eh? It's super interesting. It must be real tough with just like really tight margins. And I've heard you've been quite vocal on like the floor price of what a coffee should be. Like what should the cost of a standard flat white cost?
Relative to the increase of other costs that we have incurred, specifically speaking at the hangar, it should be $10-11.
Wow. Yeah. Do you think people would pay for that?
Well, they relatively do in the UK and everywhere else. We have this freaking notion in Australia and New Zealand that we've got this price floor that we have to sell coffee to. Cafe operators have this irrational, understandably, but irrational notion that they need to sell their coffee through $4.50 a cup because they need to do that to compete. Well, no. You're actually devaluing the product, and you're not helping yourself, let alone the entire industry. So as an example, in between when we opened the hangar and now, our rent has increased 104%.
Wow.
And our wage costs have increased 137%. Right? And relative to that, we've increased our coffee price by 68%.
Yeah.
And I'm now charging $6.50 for a regular flat white to sit in. And that's one of the most expensive cups of coffee you'll get in the city. But I don't apologize for it. We pay living wage. Like you have to pay for that, for that cafe to be sustainable, for that cafe to operate. But I've been vocal because it's just like I don't feel like a lot of people are talking about it. It's not a feeling, it's a fact. You don't really see much of it in the media. It's driven when those clickbait articles come out and stuff. And look, to be fair, I write blogs and I send them to the editors of the Post and elsewhere because I want them to, to be fair to the media, they don't know unless they're told.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's been an important part of the conversation just for the industry in New Zealand and Australia in particular, where we actually have to appreciate the value, and it's beyond price, it's the value of a cup of coffee, right? Input costs, right? Like paying living wage, it's going to be $29 an hour in September when it goes up.
Wow. Yeah. I remember when it was like 24, 25.
Yeah. It's and that's there's a reason we have really great people because we pay them well. I mean, I use the living wage as a proxy to say I pay people well. I mean, it's a fair analogy, I think, but people appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's about valuing the product. It's about valuing your offering and what it is that you're doing. And it's just understanding that in 10 years from now, BP and Z are going to be charging $10, $12 for a 8, 12 ounce flat white, and they're going to be unapologetic about it, and they're going to still be growing their same store sales.
Yeah.
Because they understand the commercials. They're going to have other value adds come from elsewhere.
Yeah.
But they're going to do it, and the industry is going to look at them and go,
Yeah.
$5, please.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. And what's been like the hardest decision you've had to make throughout your business? Is there one that comes to mind?
Oh man. One of the hardest ones, one of the toughest moments was during COVID when we had to restructure and, after COVID, we had to restructure and make some people redundant.
That'd be tough.
It's devastating. I don't wish that on anyone, both receiving and having to do it. But you know, a business is like a plant. It will die if it doesn't have if it's not sustained through through sunlight and feeding it with water. I don't know what analogy you want to compare that to a business, but if a business is in a loss-making phase, like you can't be insolvent. You have a fiduciary responsibility as a director of a company to make sure it's solvent. And it's, you can look at it from a capitalist hat and go, oh, you're just making, just there to make money. Well, no, you're there to actually run this business. And if it goes over, there are a lot of stakeholders, that employees included, all of the employees included, that are at risk. I think so. Layoffs is probably one of the hardest things. The feels in and around that is pretty heavy. Yeah.
Do you feel like you put a lot of pressure on yourself as the business continues to grow and there's more responsibility, more money at stake? How do you personally manage those more stressful times where you feel like things are a bit overwhelming and just shit's gone crazy?
I guess I break it down like this, and this is a constant thing that I'm always sort of working on, and I think it's one of the things with the whole autism side of things that have learned about myself, and I need to just continue to like remind myself it is just like binary. It's 1 or 0. It's yes or no. It's black or white. And it's really just to remind myself to focus on what I can control and don't focus on what I cannot control. Because if you focus on what you can't control, that's when the spiral starts. And that's the mind game. That's the winning that game is where I guess a successful leader and someone who's not successful, that's the difference. What you can control, you can control. So in the case of when a business is running at a loss, you can control your headcount, your wage costs. Okay, if we need to cut those because we need to in order to get the business back to making a profit, for example, then
it's a lever you can pull.
You can pull that lever. What levers can you pull? That's exactly right. The coffee market, I cannot control that. I cannot. There's if I could, I'd be a billionaire. But what I can control is I can control the price I sell a cup of coffee for and the price I can sell a kilo for. And so it's really just breaking that down and just understanding and pulling the levers you can to the best of your ability to get the outcome that you need. Because of course there's always trade-offs. You lose a staff member, then there's risk there in terms of your customer base, or you put your prices up too much, then you lose. So pulling those levers has their own trade-offs. But there's no point in worrying about, and this is what I have to remind myself almost daily at the moment, don't worry about what you can't control, focus on what you can.
100%. I think it's so important, even just outside of business, like just in general for your life and living, having that mindset, because you can get so fixated on the external things as they're happening to you and fall into that sort of like victimization mentality, but you need to take ownership of what levers can you pull to get yourself out of ruts. Completely agree. Keen to touch on a little bit as well around the sort of World Coffee Championships. Like that just sounds epic, eh? That sounds crazy. You've like you're one of the judges there. You've competed there before?
No. I suppose my official title it's a World Coffee Events representative.
Yep.
Okay. So the World Coffee Competitions is a organization of the Specialty Coffee Association, it's an association, Global Specialty Coffee Association. That association helps dictate like quality standards, helps mandate things around certain like programs in producing countries, the development of the industry within consuming countries.
Right.
Massive organization, global organization. It has an offshoot called World Coffee Competitions, or WCC. There's 7 main competitions: the World Barista Championships, World Brewers Cup, World Latte Art, World Coffee Roasting Champs, Cup Tasters. I'm going to get belted because I forgot. There's 2 more. And essentially, every year there's a world championship of each of these titles, but these titles have to come from a country. So countries like New Zealand, Australia are members of the SCA, or members of the World Coffee Competition, and they have internal competitions to find a national champion to send to the Worlds.
Crazy. It sounds like the UFC championships. Like, who's the heavyweight champ? Like, going toe for toe.
Little bit like that. And so World Coffee Events representative, which is what I am and have been since 2017, I think, goes to, or is invited by the certified body to go to the country to essentially sanction the event, make sure it's being run in accordance with the World Coffee Competition rules and regulations, to enable that country to send a national champion of any one of the competitions to the world event. And yeah, that's been one of the big things pre-COVID that I was doing a lot, traveling around and going to countries and helping national bodies with those events.
So cool.
And yeah, the people you meet it's just insane.
The more you talk about it, the more it sounded like a boxing event, eh? Like, it really is.
Yeah, man.
And like I think you mentioned was it Nick?
Yeah.
He came 5th.
Yeah, 5th in the world.
5th in the world. That's crazy. Are they judging him on like the taste, the aesthetic, the time he's completing it? Like, what's
so the World Barista, or the Barista Championships specifically, is a 15-minute competition. You have to serve 3 sets of beverages times 4 to 4 sensory judges. They're assessing you on the sensory component of your espresso, and then your milk beverage, and then a signature beverage. So the sensory components, like flavor, balance, various sensory elements with regard to that. Same with the milk beverage, same with the signature beverage. And then presentation, performance, professionalism, how they are as a barista in terms of their craft, their workflow. There's also a technical judge assessing things in terms of like the extraction times, the technical things like, are they evenly tamping across portafilters and so forth. So it's quite technical. But and a bit of a sport, I suppose.
100%.
But yeah, it's evolved a lot over the last sort of 20 years, as the industry naturally does, it was it's been a big part of who Flight was in its early days, for sure. When Nick had, before he won in New Zealand in 2013, he competed for 5 years prior, so he was well sort of it was well and truly embedded in that sort of culture at the time. And I think Flight as a company, we have probably the most championship wins across the codes in New Zealand as a single company. Not a lot of companies will value that, but we do. And also,
sounds pretty cool.
It's cool, but also like it's also a good it's in terms of employee proposition, right?
Yeah.
We've attracted some awesome talent because of that very fact.
100%.
And that's cool.
Do your baristas get quite nervous when you're walking behind the coffee machine and you're like being represented at these, world championship events? Keeps them on their toes.
They take. I mean, I love it, man. They take they take what I say very, very seriously, but at the same time, they themselves are very, very talented individuals. The crew we've got at the hangar, and like they know what they're doing. They know if something's not right. But I always try and remember to just give them feedback or just thank them because they do such a fantastic job.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. Yeah, the coffee always is bloody spot on when you're there. So good. So I guess sort of like what's next for flight coffee and raw materials, man? What's the next sort of 5 years looking like for you guys?
Great question. So for flight, we look growth, and it's hard, right? It's expensive. So we want to grow, and we're pushing to grow across different channels. So FMCG supermarkets is one of the big things that we're pushing for. But product diversification. So we've got our RTDs. We've got 6 ready to drink coffee beverages in 140Z petrol stations across the country.
Awesome.
Right now, so we want to sort of grow that channel and that category through supermarkets as well as convenience, and grow, I guess, on the street or the cafe side of it, where we can, and continue to push e-com and online growth to sort of match the changing market where people are consuming more and more coffee at home.
Yeah. Do you see like where the business is at the moment across like your sort of bean distribution sort of stream versus the sort of retail element of producing coffee and selling it versus online? Like, what are the sort of key or the biggest parts of the business in that perspective?
The bit that's the most, I guess, the bit that's most challenging is the manufacturing side of it. When you get to a certain scale, and when you're a coffee roaster, it's like you go from being, from my parents' garage to this really big garage we're in now that we don't have enough space. Operational efficiency, it's manufacturing and making sure that that's as efficient as possible. You're not wastage, downtime, and that's the piece I think that we really never appreciated when we sort of started. You very much fold into this big like production facility, and like efficiency equals dollars, and so you drive like making sure that piece is really like humming and operating. That's the big piece. I mean, supply chain is going to be a challenge across this year and next, as it is. That everyone knows that. I always say the factory's the beating heart of the business. It can't have a palpitation. That
totally makes sense. Well, we've got some sort of quick fire questions that we'll end with, and then we'll end with a bit of a quote. Richard, where can people keep up with you and your mahi? And where can they go check out some of your bloody good coffee as well?
I suppose just my Instagram is just richard.corney.
Yep.
It's that simple. And my LinkedIn as well. And then in terms of coffee, look, our website. But if you're after a great cup, we've got a cafe finder on our website. So you'll see where in New Zealand you can get get coffee from. Obviously the hangar in Wellington, and then next year we want to do something in Auckland as well. So
exciting. And we'll chuck a link in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this podcast. But just want to say thanks, Richard, man. This has been so interesting, eh? It's I feel like Flight Coffee has got such a good brand right throughout the country, particularly in Wellington.
Thanks,
so
man.
Real interesting to understand the origin story and sort of what it took to get there. So love your work, man.
Appreciate the opportunity to chat, bro. Thank you.
It's been great. And as a part of one of our sponsors, Moana Road, they gift a pair of sunnies to each of our guests. So
awesome, bro.
That's yours.
Thank you. Cheers, man.
No worries. And we'll do these quick fire questions, then we'll wrap up with a quote. Richard, what brings you true happiness?
Spending time with my family. Yeah.
What is the meaning of life?
Keep going.
Nice. Advice you wish you knew about when you were younger?
Yep. Ambition without unbridled ambition is dangerous.
And what does legacy mean to you?
Leaving something in a much better place than when I found it.
If you could change one thing in New Zealand, what would this be?
Eliminating people who live in poverty in this country.
And finally, what do you believe is the main thing that is holding back young people in New Zealand?
Their attachment to social media and the value that they perceive and the worth they perceive that they get from that.
Damn, there's a big one, eh? That's awesome, man. Hey, we'll finish up with a quote from the legendary Oprah Winfrey, of all people. This is about sort of emphasizing gratitude. And it goes like this: the more you praise and celebrate your life, the more there is in life to celebrate. When you concentrate on what you have, you always end up with having more. Cheers, bro.
Awesome, man.